I want to welcome Lisa Strandberg. Lisa is the executive director for all the pillars. Come on up, you can come on up. But she's also a fellow Presbyterian visiting us from First Pres Neenah. And the last thing I want to say is, the Matthew 25 group has been meeting ever since we had our Lenten study last year to think about ways to address poverty. And so one of the ideas is to do some in-depth learning on occasion. So this isn't just a moment for mission. This is a mission spotlight. We're going to give it a little more time, a little more of our attention, and learn about some things going on in our community and hopefully some ways that we can be a part of the solution. So thank you for being here, Lisa.
Thank you, Mike. It's a joy to be among my fellow Presbyterians this morning. Amen. I want to start with gratitude, first of all. One, for your participation and help for the homeless, because Pillars benefits from that. And two, for your work with the E2F program, Empty to Full. How many of you have made a pan of food, empty to full? That comes to our shelters and has been absolutely a godsend during the pandemic when volunteers have been hard to come by. So thank you very much for that. Just to set a little bit of context on Pillars before I dive into issues of housing and homelessness. Pillars was formed in 2018 through the merger of three nonprofit housing and homelessness organizations. Those are the Fox Valley Warming Shelter, Homeless Connections, and the Housing Partnership of the Fox Valley. Raise your hand again if you've volunteered for any of those organizations. That includes making an E2F pan. So a lot of you already know us. A lot of you already know who we are. That merger made Pillars a multi-location, a multi-site nonprofit as well, and you'll see on the slide where those sites are. We are concentrated right here in your neighborhood, in the downtown Appleton neighborhood, between College Avenue and Wisconsin Avenue. That's where the folks we serve primarily are, and that's where we are as well, right here where you all live and play and worship. The merger also made Pillars a nonprofit with a broad continuum of services. That was the intent of the merger, to bring those services together under one umbrella so that fewer folks would fall through the cracks in the transition from one service to the next. So those services include, at the left end of the spectrum, prevention and street outreach, 2 shelters and a day resource center, which we call our crisis housing program, and then some housing programs that both include case management support and just include rent adjustment. Our shelter operations, which are circled on this slide, are generally the most familiar. They are the most well-known in the community. We serve about 800 to 900 people in our 2 shelters each year. That includes about 150 children. Though know that the issue of homelessness is much larger than that. In fact, in the Appleton School District, I saw a really nice photo of a couple of our collaborators from the Appleton Area School District. In the school system, they have served to date about the same number of students, K through 12, that they served all of last academic year who were in experiences of homelessness. And that number is over 400 in the Appleton school system alone. So just to give you a sense of scale of the issue. We know that our demand for our services has increased, and we know that through a statewide system that we use to coordinate and prioritize entry into housing programs. So from January of last year to January of this year, we saw a 60% increase in the number of families registered in that system, a 30% increase in the number of individuals registered in that system. So the issue is significant and growing right here in Appleton. On the next slide, I've circled our housing programs, and you'll see that the biggest reason we're seeing an increased demand in our shelters is that housing, and affordable housing in particular, is bottlenecked in this community. That's not just here in Appleton, it's in the Fox Cities as a whole, and that's not just within Pillars programs, it's in the Fox Cities as a whole. To explain that, I'll go to the next slide. In Appleton alone, we need 300 additional housing units at all economic levels per year for the next 10 years, 300 per year for the next 10 years, new units, just to keep pace with the pent-up demand and the growth that's expected. Units were underproduced due to the housing bubble that burst several years back and underproduction that followed. So that need is especially significant, as you might imagine, among those with a need for affordable housing. On this next slide, you'll see a table that's pulled from a recent report, the College North Neighborhood Plan. Some of you may be familiar with it. It spells out the number of units needed at each economic level, at each level of affordability. And Pillars concerns itself primarily with folks in the very low income and extremely low income categories. That is very low income, 50% or less of median income. Extremely low income, 30% or less of median income. That's defined by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And there are many, many units needed at that level, and as you can see, the market will not provide those units. So it's up to good people, it's up to the government, it's up to nonprofits to solve that issue together. It's part of the reason why we have worked with a couple of faith communities. I'm going to name one here. The First United Methodist Church of Neenah Menasha just recently banded together with the Neenah Menasha Emergency Society to purchase a duplex for Pillars. They donated the funds to purchase a duplex, which is now housing 2 families out of shelter. So helping to solve the issue, one example of faith communities in action to do that. If you could go to the next slide. A lot of times when we think of affordable housing and folks hear about affordable housing developments or even a home, one of Pillars' homes coming to their neighborhood, they might get a little squeamish. Sometimes people object to the idea of an affordable housing development in their neighborhood because of what we call NIMBYism, not in my backyard, NIMBYism, and fear about who these people are, right? What you can see on this graphic is that often these people are those essential workers that we all relied on through COVID, our grocery cashier, our childcare workers, our servers and bartenders at restaurants who suffered so tremendously through the pandemic. So it's often those very folks that we rely on every day who are those people in need of affordable housing. The issue is vast. The issue is a crisis. The issue is growing more significant for families in particular. And we are just really grateful for your interest in the issue of housing and homelessness here in Appleton. I brought with me some brochures and also some resource cards. They're business-sized cards that list all of our services. They could be useful to you. They could be useful to hand out if you encounter someone in an experience of homelessness in the community. They're back in what I would call the narthex, but I don't know what you call it. Okay, narthex, good. And I'll be back there too and available during coffee time if you'd care to hear more, learn more, ask questions. It really does take a community working together to solve these complex issues. It really does take partners of all stripes who are concerned and invested in solving these intractable issues of poverty. So thank you for your faithful response to this concern. I really appreciate it.